Welcome everybody, welcome to the N64 Memories Podcast, welcome to episode 6, which is an episode celebrating the 30th birthday of the Nintendo 64, which released in Japan on June 23rd, 1996. And I've got a really fantastic guest celebrating with me. He was an N64 contributor for Nintendo Life. He opened and started the N64Today.com website. Martin, how you doing?
I'm good, thanks, Steve. How are you?
Yeah, I'm great. Thank you for coming on. Really appreciate it. People watching won't realise that we first, collaborated about 12 years ago. Did you realise that?
Yes. I was looking the other day, funnily enough, at our project.
I know. I can't believe it's been 12 years, and then this is the first time we've actually spoken face to face, which is pretty amazing.
I know, long overdue, but I'm glad we're finally doing it.
Absolutely. So I really appreciate it. So I want to take you back then to 1996. That was when it released in Japan around this time, but we didn't get it till about 9 months later here in the UK in March 97. So what are your memories of 1996 before it came out here?
Oh, I remember spending a lot of time looking through magazines, sort of, in real sort of anticipation of what was to come. I think must have been at that point. I think it was still like Nintendo magazine system. It hadn't quite become, I think, Nintendo official magazine. And I remember that used to be sort of a monthly buy, and you'd pick it up. And I think it was there was definitely an issue they had where they'd been to, one of the big shows in Japan, and they'd done a sort of a big blowout showing all the games coming. And I just thought it was incredible because, and maybe something that people don't something we take for granted nowadays is, of course, when you see any sort of game news being announced, it's always like a trailer and it's in high definition. It gives lots of detail, and there's usually like a press release with it. And actually back then, what we were getting was, it's a page on a magazine with a couple of like maybe 3 or 4 like blurry screenshots. It's like a camera, analog camera sort of aimed at a screen and sort of taken, and then they've somehow printed it. And I thought it was great because it was kind of the magic and the wonder of it, wasn't it? In the sense of you were getting a glimpse of a game, but you didn't really quite know how it was going to actually end up, and you were sort of only seeing like a really small part of it early on in development.
Yeah, absolutely. Just like a static shot. We had no idea how it would actually play. It just, but I don't know about you, but they blew me away, those screenshots. Even like if they were blurry, they still blew me away.
Yeah, and it's really funny. Like, recently I was looking back through some old issues. There's I think we've both used it before. There's the Out of Print Archive website, which has sort of old scans of the old magazines on.
It does.
And I always found it interesting, especially when I was still doing N64 Today. You'd go. It was always quite good for research because you go back through and you would see how a game sort of developed over time, but just through these sort of sporadic screenshots you got. So like one of them, one of my favorite games is on the N64 is Body Harvest. And when you look at early versions of that game compared to what it actually ended up like, it's still got the same sort of core, I suppose, like DNA and thing, and sort of design and things like that, but it does look completely different in many ways.
Yeah.
And it's just crazy to think sort of what development journey it went through to get that. But that was the thing. Every month you were getting something in the magazines. You were getting something new, and a lot of at that time, I remember, the Super Nintendo was still, for me, a really, that was my platform at the time, and it was still really prominent, and I was playing loads of games. I think probably around that time, something like Donkey Kong Country 2, Diddy Kong's Quest, was sort of blowing me away with the pre-rendered graphics and things. But even that didn't have the same level of sort of excitement and amazement as these early N64 games. We were seeing them before they released. It's not like Mario 64. Even just from a couple of screenshots, you were like, "Wow, that looks like nothing I've seen before."
Yeah, that's exactly what it was. They looked revolutionary. That transition from 2D to 3D. It made everything look not futuristic, but it looked like the next evolution, didn't it, in gaming?
Yeah, definitely.
Which one were you looking forward to the most? Which one were you going from month to month to find out the next bit of information or screenshot?
So I think at the time, I mean, everyone was excited for Super Mario 64, but I think the one game in the lead up to release, and it was the one that even after the N64 had been released, because it came out later, obviously over here, was Star Fox 64, or Lilac Wars, as it was when it came over here. I don't know why, because I had possibly played Star Wing on the SNES, but it wasn't a game that had really sort of, you know, I enjoyed it, I think, but it didn't really sort of capture me. But there was something about Star Fox 64 that just kind of looked really impressive and really fun. And maybe, I don't know, maybe it was because it kind of had that, maybe not in the earlier screenshots, but it had that cinematic quality about it, and it just looked really high quality, really polished, and just really fun. So from memory, it was that, and yeah, I mean, Mario 64, of course, everyone was going nuts for that. So
Yeah, absolutely. For me, it was all about Mario Kart 64 for me.
oh really?
I was so hooked on Super Mario Kart on the SNES. From playing it around my friend's house to then getting my own SNES for Christmas one year. I was obsessed with Super Mario Kart. So the next Mario Kart game I was just itching for it. Just month to month, looking at screenshots, finding out more information. And early on, it was Super Mario Kart R.
Yep.
With a couple of different characters as well, from what I remember. So and then it transitioned into what we know now. But yeah, I couldn't wait for that. Couldn't wait.
Yeah, no, that was definitely one which was exciting. Funny enough, Super Mario Kart was one of the it was one of the games I got on my Super Nintendo, which was the first console we'd had in my house as a child. So we played so much Super Mario Kart,
Yeah,
and like you say, I think there was something very exciting with. I can't remember if in early on they had shown how whether they'd shown if they'd shown any of the 4-player, or if it was only just they'd shown 2-player footage. But I remember there was definitely excitement in the run up to release of the idea of playing 4-player split screen Mario Kart. I mean, that
yeah,
was just kind of
absolutely,
revolutionary. So
absolutely. I mean, I know of some 4-player screenshots from early on. So that, yeah, I believe there were. Um, and that was so exciting as well. Imagining three of your friends around, all crammed around the telly, playing that. It was just unheard of, wasn't it, at the time? I think
yeah,
for us as kids.
definitely something we definitely take for granted now. When obviously everything's all we're connected. You know, even I'm just literally looking at my dishwasher. Even that can connect to Wi-Fi. And
Yeah,
things like that, which is ridiculous. And then but back then we just didn't have that luxury. And actually, dare I say, something's been sort of lost now, because we don't really do local and split screen multiplayer isn't
yeah,
as prioritized. And actually, back then, that's what was so fun. You could just get you and, like you say, you and 3 of your mates in a room and just have a really good time. And they
yeah.
were really fun games. You'd play Mario Kart for hours and you wouldn't get bored of it.
No, it was just a huge social event, wasn't it?
Mm,
Going to your friend's house, they're coming to your house. Eating and drinking along with it, and the chatting and the competitiveness of it. Like you say, I think that's got a little bit lost when you can play your friends online now and just stay in the
mm,
bedroom on your own. I imagine it's not quite the same. I've never done it.
no.
Okay, so what about the first sort of game you got your hands on? Like, I'm still talking about before it came out. Where were you when you first held a controller? You first played on the Nintendo 64. Do you remember anything about that?
I do, and I'm hoping I've got this right. I think I was in the first time I saw an N64 was a demo unit, and it was or a demo kiosk, and it was set up in a Virgin Megastore
Right.
in my town, so Reading, which is where I live, and um, and I remember I don't know why we'd just gone in there for some reason and just went upstairs. I was probably going up to look at the game section anyway to see what SNES games or whatever they had, and yeah, there was just one there in all its glory. I can't remember when abouts, but it was definitely, I think, in the run up to it releasing, or at least very shortly after. And and yeah, it was just one of those things. Someone else was playing it, and I just watched it, and I think they were on like the bomb battlefield or something, and I just thought, wow, this just seeing it in motion was a
Yeah.
completely different, it's a completely different experience, and I think that is the thing which really stands out even to today for me with Super Mario 64 is just how fluid it is as a game. The
Yeah.
frame it's running at like 20 frames per second or something like that, but actually the animation and the quality of it and the fact that it does feel like a really smooth, responsive game, and you could see that when people were playing it. And yeah, I remember going up to the demo console when it was the person came off it, because the first thing I did, because I'd read about it, I think in Official Nintendo Magazine or whatever it was I made sure I held the controller correctly. So I put my
Yeah.
left hand on the middle prong and the
Yeah.
right hand on the right prong, because I was like, no, this is how you do it. I've read about this, and
Yeah.
got it right from the get go. So yeah, maybe that was a sign of things to come. But yeah,
Amazing.
no, great time. I mean, it was one of those things. It was, yeah,
Yeah,
it's
amazing.
crazy to think you still think about it
Yeah,
30
yeah.
years
I,
later.
I, I do remember two instances. My first one was in Toys R Us, like a demo kiosk, like you say, and it was Super Mario 64 as well. And just there was a few of us crowding round this person playing it, and waiting for your turn to have a go on it, and struggling with the controller maybe, and the C buttons trying to move the camera around, just kind
Mm.
of getting a feel for it. But it was spectacular. It was amazing. And then my other memory, it must have come out by this time, but was in a game or an electronics boutique, and Wave Race was on the demo console or the demo kiosk, like you say, and having a go with Wave Race as well. That game,
Mm.
that game when it came out, even now, I love that game. I absolutely love that game.
Yeah, I mean, the water physics, I think, still really hold up in it, don't they? And
Yeah, they do.
the only the only slight crime was Nintendo giving us the PAL version, which they didn't optimize, which it's
Yes.
still. And I remember reading about this on a forum some years ago, where it's like someone described it perfectly. They're like, the PAL version of Wave Race is a really good game, but the NTSC version of Wave Race isn't truly exceptional game.
Yeah.
I was just like,
Yeah.
yeah, that's a perfect way of putting it.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, the best way that I've ever played it is the Rumble Pack version from Japan.
Mm.
That's my go-to version. I love that version. Same with Mario 64 as well. The Rumble Pack Japanese version of that. I think those two versions are my favourite. They're really enjoyable. Really enjoyable. What about some of the other earlier games? In sort of '96 releases, obviously in Japan and America. Some of our earlier releases. What other games caught your eye and you enjoyed?
So it was interesting because I always liked the look of Pilot Wings 64, and it's a game which now I absolutely love.
Yeah,
And I'd had Pilot Wings on the Super Nintendo, so I was familiar with it. But then for some reason, I never actually bought it during the um, sort of during the key period, the actual life of the N64. I think it was a game I bought afterwards, but I do remember having a go on it, and you know, probably at the time maybe was not as impressed with it as I should have been, but I think, and a lot of people did. I think it's because Super Mario 64 was really something special, whereas
Yeah,
Pilot Wings kind of was dare I say, an evolution of what came before. But to be
yeah,
honest, it's such a good evolution. I mean, it really sort of masterfully kind of demonstrated the capabilities of the N64, both in terms of the graphical power of it, but also the analog stick. That game plays so well; it's so precise. So it was one of those games which I think I definitely looked at with curiosity. But yeah, I think once the N64 came out, I mean, I didn't get my N64 until Christmas '97, and by that point, other games had, we had Star Fox, we had Bomberman, I had Mario Kart 64 was out, and I
yeah,
think a lot of the multiplayer games in particular kind of ended up taking a lot of my my attention. But
yeah.
it was certainly one beforehand I thought um, looked very interesting. And yeah, and then I think there were other games, weren't there, like Cruising USA, which wasn't. It's a game. Funny enough, it's a game I've enjoyed, a sort of like a guilty pleasure since. But again, that
Yeah,
wasn't a game that maybe caught
yeah,
my attention. But I knew it was kind of a big deal because it had been an arcade game, and it was the
yeah,
idea of an arcade game being in your home, which um, was quite quite that, along with like Killer Instinct Gold.
mm,
Um, was quite exciting in the sense that previously those games you were going to be playing them on a big huge arcade cabinet, probably in like a Laser Quest somewhere or something.
yeah, yeah. I think Pilot Wings, suffered a bit of an injustice being released
Mm,
alongside Super Mario 64 because it is technically a really fantastic game. I think it just got overshadowed at the time. So I think if that had come out, I don't know, 6 months later, it might have had a better deal. Cruising USA is a guilty pleasure of mine as well. I love it. It's not a great game in technical aspect of it, but it's simple. It's a lot of fun. It doesn't take itself too seriously, and I'll have a blast on that one. Of the three cruising games, it is my favourite. And
yeah.
then I think Killer Instinct Gold was a bit of a disappointment. I don't know what you feel about it compared to Killer Instinct 2 in the arcade.
Yes.
It felt too watered down, or it had to be watered down that much to get onto a Nintendo 64 cartridge. What do you think?
I completely agree. I think it was. I remember seeing the arcade version, and I mentioned the Laser Quest earlier. I think it was actually a local Laser Quest. They had they had the arcade machine,
Mm,
and it's one of those things. I went and watched this probably sometime earlier this year. I went and watched like the footage of someone had done a recording of what the arcade game, the intro and the track screen and all that sort of stuff, and it was just brilliant. It's just got that bit where it comes up at the start with the Nintendo Presents logo, and it had that. I think at that time they were using the arcade game to advertise that it was coming to the N64. So there was that
yeah.
bit, when it was playing the music in the background, and there's this big booming voice over the top, and it's like Killer Instinct coming to your home in 1995 on only Nintendo Ultra 64, and it was just then cuts into the actual intro, and it was it was one of those games. It just looked really, really good in the arcade. It sounded amazing, and then, like you say, when it came out on the N64, it it didn't sound as good. And it definitely didn't look as good. The animation just
Yeah,
wasn't there. It looked a bit muddy, and also you know it kind of. I think also what kind of didn't help it was the fact that it was, from memory, it was a game you played with the D-pad. I think you might have been able to use the controls.
yeah,
I couldn't remember, but it was
yeah.
which made sense. It was D-pad, but again, but as a result, it kind of felt a bit. It felt a bit old, and also the
Mm,
fact that it'd been on SNES, which had kind of, I think a lot of people had got their fill of it on the SNES anyway. So,
yeah.
mm,
Yeah, the Nintendo 64 struggled with fighting games, didn't it? There's not one that was the standout fighting game. There's a few that are okay.
mm,
Mortal Kombat 4 is okay. Fighter's Destiny is okay. Like, I don't know what it was.
Yeah.
I don't know how no one could figure it out. It feels like.
No. They just, it just needed Tekken or Virtua Fighter, really, didn't it? It
Yeah,
just,
yeah,
um,
yeah. Those were the ones. Those were the ones. So right, like this episode's about celebrating the 30th anniversary of the N64, and I want to ask you why, still after 30 years, you like talking about it. You still play it. What is it about the Nintendo 64 that has captured you for 3 decades?
I think it's just because I'm a sad old man, but no, it's not that. No, I think, I mean, obviously, with a lot of this, there's going to be like a heavy dose of nostalgia, isn't it? I mean, for
Yeah, of course.
me, it was, you know, the Super Nintendo was my first console, but the N64 was the first console that I sort of it was the one I actively wanted. I got given a SNES, and I really enjoyed it, and I was very grateful for it. But the N64, the one was the one which I chose, and I was like, I really want to play that, and I want to buy that and have that. And it was just that kind of, it came at sort of the right point in I suppose in my life, in the sense of, we were talking about earlier, it was the console where you sat down and you got your friends round and you played loads of GoldenEye, you played loads of Mario Kart, Mario Tennis, Super Smash Bros, whatever. It was just really, really fun. And I think, um, what keeps me talking about it, what keeps me playing it, is kind of one of the it's one key thing, which is, I think it's a really interesting console. And when I say interesting, I mean in the sense of, it does, for its time, many of the things it did were sort of revolutionary, or really popularized certain things that which have sort of become common features, or of modern gaming. Um, and it had absolutely fantastic games in the form of Ocarina of Time, Super Mario 64, GoldenEye, all of them absolutely seminal titles that completely transformed gaming, and
Mm.
the legacy, and and the impact of which is still, even in a probably quite a small way now, but still felt today. But I think also what's interesting is, it was such a flawed console at the same time. It Nintendo made some really, some of the decisions it's made, I wouldn't say they were questionable, but as a result of the decisions that they made with the console, it kind of, it weirdly felt sort of really futuristic and quite antiquated at the same time. It really pushed itself in terms of the power of the system and being able to do 4 player split screen, but then equally, it uses cartridges, and
Yeah,
with really, really small storage, and it looked, in many ways, it kind of looked outdated compared to, or antiquated maybe, compared to sort of like the PlayStation, and to some extent the Sega Saturn, which were using this
yeah,
really fancy CD technology with FMV and so on. And I think, as a result of some of those decisions, especially around the cartridges and so on, and obviously Nintendo's making a system that was very difficult to develop for, and maybe not losing a lot of third party support, it's just a very interesting kind of period within Nintendo's history, where it had this tremendous success with the Nintendo Entertainment System, and then the SNES that followed, and then the N64 was kind of, it was the era it made some of its, probably made, up to that point, its best games it had ever made. But actually, in terms of the system's success, it's not to say it wasn't a successful system. It still sold like 33 million units, but compared to like the PlayStation 1, it was completely outsold, and
yeah,
then the PlayStation 1 revolutionized gaming in many other ways, in terms of making it much more mainstream. So one of the things, and then this is what I mean, is it's fun to go back and play some of these games, because I go back with the lens of, I know some of the games I'm playing, I'm like, this isn't a particularly good game, or maybe it's not, maybe it wasn't a good game at the time, or it hasn't aged well, or whatever. But actually, it's quite fun to go back and look at sort of some of the design decisions around the game, maybe sort of appreciating some of the limitations. So, for example, something like the N64 version of Resident Evil 2, where the entire game is 64 megabytes and it has all of the FMV cutscenes and content from the PlayStation game, which is just a technical feat of, which is just completely astonishing.
Yeah.
But even same with some of the other games, I played. I think it was the end of last year. I played Spider-Man 64, which was which was a port of a PlayStation 1 version of the game, and the PlayStation 1 version, it's better. But actually, the N64, what they did to kind of get around some of the limitations, where they couldn't do all the full motion video and so on, it was a good compromise, and I still really enjoyed playing it. So
I liked it.
Yeah. So I think it's that. I just think it's a very interesting period, and also it's just that era of games where this isn't just true of the N64, but I do think the N64 did it the best. It's because it's that first foray into sort of mainstream 3D gaming on, in terms of home consoles anyway, sort of putting PCs to one side. The generation that followed with the GameCube and the Xbox and the PS2, those games on those platforms they seem quite similar to games you have now. It's almost like that's kind of like the real start of kind of the modern era of gaming, because it's kind of at that point they had maybe the processing power and the game design down and everything like that to make games which have since sort of iterated. Whereas the N64 is much more, and the PlayStation 1, there was a lot more experimentation. There's a lot of games which are very, you wouldn't see those concepts or ideas today. You only have to think of something like Blast Core, for example, which we've not seen any kind of, not even a spiritual successor since. And there's,
it's a transition period.
I think so. Yeah, exactly. It's that. I think it was that developers didn't really know. It's not to say they didn't know what they're doing. That's not really fair to them. But they're just trying this out for the first time. And actually, what made it so interesting with the N64 is that Nintendo got Mario right. They just went straight in and they got it right. Whereas I don't think necessarily the same could have been said of Sega. They didn't. They really didn't make that initial transition anyway. I think later Sonic games they finally got it, but Sonic on. I'm trying to think. I think there's only one Sonic game on the Saturn from memory or something like that, isn't it? I can't remember what it is. Sonic.
Oh yeah, my Saturn knowledge is very limited.
Yeah, but someone in the comments can correct me on that, I'm sure. But basically, the point is that I think there was just lots of experimentation and also lots of clever game design, because actually I think these developers, they were using really powerful hardware, but at the same time, powerful for its time, but they also knew that it came with lots of limitations. So they did clever things to kind of mask those limitations, so that you managed to, you still got a game which maybe ran at like 15 to 20 frames per second, but it still looked good and it still was playable enough.
No, absolutely agree. And it's amazing how so many games got it spot on. Like they really nailed it down in that transition period. Like Nintendo did with Mario. If they'd got Mario wrong, I dread to think what could have happened if they'd got that one wrong. But like James Bond, that was done right. F-Zero was done right. Some of the Star Wars games were done right. Maybe not Shadows of the Empire, but I would argue Rogue Squadron and Episode 1 Racer were pretty spot on for the time period.
Definitely.
So a fantastic array of games. Absolutely. Right, well, let's end it there. Thank you so much for joining me, Martin, on this special episode for the 30th anniversary.
Thank you very much for having me. It's been great to talk with you.
Yeah, you too, absolutely, and I really appreciate your time. Maybe we can do it again sometime.
I would love to.
Brilliant. Right, thanks a lot.
All the best. Take care.
Thank you.